Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Um, it is 1 o'clock, so I think, people will continue to trickle in, but for the sake of time, I think we'll get started right away. So my name is Leah Shapiro, and I'm a program officer on the Protection Services team at Scholars at Risk. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on the 2025 Scholar Survey results. Next slide, please, Serena. So first, I'm going to walk us through the agenda for today's webinar, which will be 1 hour. My colleague Serena Rosenthal will begin the webinar with a summary of the survey results, focusing on key takeaways and recommendations for the network. Next, we will hear from two scholars, Jonathan Niguet and Wasma Amin Abdelgadir, who will expand on some of these recommendations through the lens of their personal experiences. Next, Nancy Postero from the University of California in San Diego will discuss her experience hosting at-risk scholars on her campus. And at the end of the webinar, we hope to have about 15 minutes for a live Q&A. We have disabled the chat for today's webinar, so throughout the session, we invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A function that you should see at the bottom of your screen. Our colleagues will respond to some of your questions in writing throughout the webinar, and we will address some questions live during the Q&A session at the end. This webinar is being recorded, and a recording will be shared with all participants and will be posted on the Scholars at Risk website. And with that, I will turn it over to Serena.
Thank you, Leah. Hi, everyone. My name is Serena Rosenthal, and I manage Scholars at Risk's placement services with our protection team. And in that capacity, I regularly evaluate the work that we do to make sure that it is as tailored and responsive to the needs of the scholars that we work with, as well as the universities. I was lucky enough to work on this scholar survey and to analyze the data for the report that we prepared. But because there was really such rich data in the survey and in the report, and we recognize all of the time that went into it for the scholars who filled out the survey, we really wanted to engage in a wider discussion like we're having today. So I'll start by just sharing a little bit about the objectives of the survey, as well as the webinar that we're having today. So for the survey, we were really looking to understand the impact of SAR's work on the scholars that we work with and to identify areas for program growth, both within SAR organizationally and across the wider network of higher education institutions within the SAR network. As well, we have the webinar today, and the reason that we're doing that is to engage with the wider network in a discussion. So we'll be presenting our findings as well as having a conversation with scholars and university representatives. We'll be reflecting further on the takeaways and the recommendations that were in the survey, and we'll gain insight for future scholar surveys. So in the past, we've done these every few years. So there's some parallel data that we have from past years, and we hope to enrich that data in the future as well. So let's dive in. I'll start with some demographics of the respondents that we had for this survey. We sent the survey out to all of the scholars and alumni that we've worked with over the past 10 years, and that includes scholars who we're actively working with as well as alumni. We received responses from 330 scholars. Moving forward, I'll probably just say scholars, but that will include scholars, practitioners of human rights, and alumni. This included 40% of the responses were from scholars who are actively supported and 60% were alumni. With regards to gender, we received about 30% of the responses were from women, 70% were from men, and this parallels the gender breakdown of the applications for assistance that we generally receive at Scholars at Risk. And as you can see here in the graphic, about 80% of the alumni respondents were currently located outside of their country of origin when they filled out the survey, with the majority being located in Europe and North America. And similarly, the breakdown of percentages here, it matches the breakdown of percentage of placement in Europe and North America across our network. In the survey report, we identified four key findings, which I'll list briefly here, and then we'll get into them a little bit more throughout the webinar. The first one was that scholars and alumni reported high levels of satisfaction with SAR staff and the SAR network more generally. About 85% of the respondents reported high levels of satisfaction, from somewhat satisfied to extremely satisfied, and that was a little bit higher than the survey that we did in 2019. In addition to that, more than 80% of the respondents said that SAR's support has been essential in helping them continue their academic work. So this doesn't mean that there's not challenges, which we know that there are, but it is a recognition of the important work that we do together. In addition to that, 82% of the alumni who reported being employed said that they were still working in higher education. I think it's important to recognize within that, because that's such a high number, a high percentage, that respondents also said that finding academic employment remained a very big challenge. So for our next key finding, we wanted to talk about some of the things that made it easier to continue your work in the academic space. And most of the respondents said that networking and developing strong language skills, specifically local language skills, were key to long-term career success. And in addition to that, one of the biggest challenges to integrating and feeling like there were opportunities for academic career success and professional success in general were not learning the language. And last but not least, scholars and alumni advocated for positions that were longer than 1 year. So, taking those key findings into account, we made 4 main recommendations that were specifically geared towards scholars at risk, similar support organizations, and the network of higher education institutions. In the Q&A, if you have additional recommendations on top of the ones that we have, we'd be more than welcome to hearing them, but I will list them out right now. The first one is investing in scholar professional development. The second is building relationships with language education organizations, offering more networking opportunities, and continuing to offer 2-year placements. So I will get into each of these in a little bit more detail. So for the first one, we understand that professional development really looks different for everyone, whether that's because of a scholar's academic discipline or their past experience, and probably most importantly, what they want to be doing in the future. But one thing that was very evident from the scholar responses in the survey was that most scholars are eager to attend more academic conferences where they can share their work and meet more peers in their fields. Scholars often underline the fact that they have been cut off from research and publication opportunities due to their risk experience, and finding ways to reinvest in that is important. It's also really important to recognize that the cost of attending conferences can be prohibitive. So we want to work with the network of higher education institutions in the SAR network to think about what resources already exist to send scholars to conferences and what can be found, fundraised, and invested in to increase conference participation. One other thing that we have done is reaching out to conference organizers to ask for free or reduced cost registrations, and often conference organizers are very amenable to that. In addition, so Scholars at Risk is celebrating our 25th anniversary, and over these past 25 years, we have always provided individualized guidance and support to the scholars that we work with. But we found that we were often providing similar types of advice to scholars, and we wanted to find a way to do that in a group to get the added benefit of bringing scholars together. So over the past few years, we've created trainings that focus on a variety of things like making the most of your time at a university and planning for a transition. But we've also partnered with other organizations and universities that have provided more tailored trainings, like an academic job search within a specific country, or research methodology in the sciences. And we found that these have been received very positively. And even some universities have started offering trainings for the support staff on campus as well. In addition to that, I think it's important to recognize that navigating a new university is challenging no matter where you're coming from. And it's not always evident what types of career support services exist on campus. So, as SAR staff and also university staff, one thing that we can do is just make it easier for scholars to understand what's available to them on campus. And that may be resources to work on their CV and cover letters, working with a career coach, accessing pedagogy resources, and more. In addition to all of the support on campus and with these organizations, it's also important to remember that cross-border collaboration is key. So once scholars are displaced, they often can't engage in their field research, but want to remain connected to home and do so in a variety of ways, whether that's virtual teaching or supervising students. And so working with the scholars to understand, what are their goals in terms of their work on campus and at home, and seeing if there's ways to support that is important. The last but not least, teaching and speaking opportunities can be a really helpful way for scholars to feel connected to their colleagues and to their students. Oftentimes, many of the scholars that we work with want to teach on campus. So if there's flexibility within your university or college, we encourage you to have conversations with scholars about what they're interested in doing and what they're capable of. The arrangements really vary across the network. So that may be teaching a full load or guest lecturing, co-teaching, starting teaching in the second or third semester, or just giving speeches about your work and personal experience. And that can be both, beneficial for the scholar, but also for the greater community. So our next recommendation regarding language, I wanted to first start with the graph from the survey where we asked scholars what their primary academic challenges were when they relocated. And as you can see here, language barriers were number one. So what are ways that we can help scholars gain fluency and access services for language? Many of the universities in our network already offer free enrollment to language courses on campus, and a lot actually offer them to scholars' spouses as well, which can be really wonderful. In addition, we know from scholars that identifying, social language meetups can provide an opportunity to practice the language, but also just gain a greater sense of community. We have partnered with several local online language programs, online language programs that offer a variety of local languages. Some are Lingoda, Babbel, Duolingo, and these courses have offered some discounts to our scholars, which can be really beneficial. And one thing that we're looking into is whether we can provide more language services to scholars before they arrive on campus while they're awaiting their visas. And last but not least, connecting with local immigrant serving organizations that already have connections to language providers and programs may be a way to learn about, what's available within the community, but also to open up opportunities for the scholars that we work with. For recommendation number 3, I think sometimes the term networking can be taboo, but we understand that creating connection and a sense of community is really key for helping scholars feel included and secure in a new community. This can look many different ways, but we'll start by thinking about ways to include scholars in university and departmental events beyond just strict work meetings. So, for instance, I worked with a scholar many years ago who said she was invited to every single meeting that her supervisor went to, and it helped her understand the funding landscape on campus and different infrastructure that she may not have been aware of beforehand, and also just created more opportunities to connect with new colleagues. In addition to that, it's important to recognize that most of the scholars that we work with are interested in remaining in academia, but there are some who want to explore professional opportunities beyond the university. So if there's ways to make connections to industry contacts, that would be very helpful as well. And that can be both academic or non-academic jobs. Similarly, I worked with a scholar who is a scholar of education, and she started attending local school council meetings to sort of bolster her academic research. If scholars are, more interested in investing in their academic career, which most are, we have found that partnering with academic associations has been incredibly valuable. I will just say that the academic associations in our network have offered, a wide array of services to the scholars over the past years, including free membership, discounted registration to their annual meetings, personalized mentorship. They've created trainings for the scholars we work with. Some have even provided some funding for placement. So I think that that has been a really strong area for investment. Um, and in addition to that, one thing that came out of the survey results was that wraparound support is really important, and it's very challenging to feel like you can focus on your academic work if you don't feel settled in the rest of your life. And so finding ways to invest in your community, whether that's through religious groups or sport or your children's school, that's important as well. And last but not least, peer connection is critical. So over the years, the scholars have really highlighted the importance of gaining connection to other scholars and learning from one another. So as you can see here, this is a quote from our survey, which I will not read for time, but you can see just really asking for more opportunities to connect with other scholars and highlighting how much you can learn from one another. And with that said, I'll just note that we are looking for more ways to formalize connection among scholars, and we're hoping to pilot an alumni mentor program in the next year where scholars can learn from one another and offer guidance from their individual vantage points. And I recognize that my time is limited, but I have two more slides. So our last recommendation is to continue to offer 2-year placements. I do want to highlight that over the past year, the majority of placements in our network were actually longer than 1 year, and SAR and members alike want to offer longer placements. But there are, of course, some structural limitations to that, whether that's capacity, that may be staff capacity or institutional capacity. Funding is, of course, the biggest limitation. Last year, 50% of the placements that were created in our network required some additional funding to the funding that was provided from the university. And there are some countries where there are laws that limit the length of a placement. There are also some examples of what makes it a little bit easier to create longer placements. That includes national funding programs like we have in Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, France, and more. In terms of creating a structure on campus, many universities create campus committees that allow for multiple members of the community, the university community, to work together, and it provides some sense of shared support and continuity and institutional knowledge. And then we have seen hosts and scholars apply for joint funding, or 2 universities that have pooled funding to create a joint hosting arrangement. It is important to remember that the positions in the network are always going to be temporary, but we hope that they can provide enough time and support during which scholars can plan for the future, build out their network, and meaningfully re-engage with a new academic community. So with all that said, I will pause so that you can hear from the scholars and from the university representatives, and we can engage in the Q&A. But this QR code here is a link to our full scholar survey. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to scholars@nyu.edu, because we do want to engage further and make sure that this is, applied meaningfully.
Thank you, Serena. So that was a very high-level overview of the survey results, and we do encourage everyone to read the full report for more details. If you didn't get a chance to scan that QR code on the last slide, I will also post a link to the survey in the chat in a couple of minutes. And next, we're going to hear from our 2 scholar speakers who will expand on some of these recommendations by talking about their personal experiences. So first, it is my pleasure to introduce Wasma Amin Abdelgader, who will talk about various professional development opportunities that she has pursued in her current position. Dr. Abdelgader is a Sudanese molecular biologist with a PhD in genetics and molecular and cellular biology, a master's degree in biochemistry and molecular biology, and a bachelor's degree in biochemistry. She is currently a postdoctoral researcher at Karolinska Institute in Sweden, and she is committed to maintaining high standards in scientific education and advancing the empowerment of women in STEM. Welcome, Wasma.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabine. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the nice introduction, Leah. So it's more like telling you my experience with the positive and challenges that I face and I'm still facing. So technically, exactly 3 years ago, I was in my home country, Sudan. I just get my PhD back from Italy, and I was ready to start like a flourishing future at my home university as I was a staff member there. Then exactly 10 years, 10 days after the war started, the fighting, and I had to flee my country in about 2 or 3 months after. Then I had like almost 6-7 months of, let's say, emotional craziness, worried about my family, how I left behind, my future, everything. I was like completely lost. And then I got the tip from a friend of mine telling me like, apply to this, like something called Scholar at Risk, and just let's see what will happen. And like forward, backward, the communication, and also it was kind of struggling from my end. I finally managed to end up with a placement contract for assistant from SARS. And then exactly 1 year after that, or like from me leaving my home country, and actually less than 2-3 months from the contract, I landed in my first position at Karolinska Institute here in Sweden as a research engineer. And then it just moved on 1 year, and now I'm a postdoctoral researcher. You may think this is like a quick and a rapid and successful transition story. Partially it is, but also it was full of challenges. So this is what you see from the first glance. But before me coming to Sweden, actually, all my academic training, all my research experience provided me with a strong scientific foundation that I was thinking like, okay, just going back to my home country, I will have my future ready. Then life happened. So I realized when I moved to Sweden here, like my scientific background, my skills transferred. Maybe it still needed like kind of adjustment or training, but it's still the system knowledge, the ecosystem that I used to work on did not transfer with me. However, at Karolinska Institute and in general in Sweden, I found a really supportive environment and a system, and also like a guidance from my case officer here at SAR. I realized that like I do have the environment, I do have the support. Now it's only rely on me technically in order to gain the most of this experience. So first of all, I just as a research engineer, I had the freedom to truly engage in developing my professional career on a personal level, first of all, and social level, cultural level, and also to gain more training, precise training on what I want to do, what I want to work. And I'm really thankful that I was in the right institute, in the right environment, that they believe on my abilities and in my skills. So we started, let's say, with just like internal scientific meetings, getting to know the environment, getting to know my colleague, all the ongoing projects and experimental strategies. It was really fruitful, nourishing environment for me to gain a lot, like more than what I expected within just 1 year. So all those meetings just allow me to understand how collaborative research and how the organization and scientific decisions being made in KI or in my new scientific environment. I also had the opportunity to collaborate with different research groups, with different PIs, which was like really fascinating. Again, I felt it's not wasn't just a pair of hands. I was also like, I had the intellectual ability to think and to interact and collaborate with other groups, with other research projects inside KI or inside SciLife, where like my hub quarter working lab. And actually, I started directly working on a collaborative project, actually funded by the European Research Council, collaboration between 3 countries or 3 universities from here in Sweden, from based on KI, and then Belgium and Germany. And this create like more as an international environment. And I felt like I cannot literally reflect this just in words, but it was very rich experience and is still ongoing. So international collaboration like this actually exposed me to different perspectives and strengthen the scientific process through shared expertise and also understanding how it works in different environments here in Europe. Another aspect regarding my experience with the SAR and with my current placement was also the knowledge transfer. So I had the chance to participate in teaching younger scientists, younger students, like through internship or training a PhD student and assisted or in a laboratory training. So that was like real nice. So maybe by the end of the first year, I already have a clear idea what will be my own project working on. I have 2 kinds of collaboration. I already put the draft, or let's say more or less for publication opportunities. So it was really successful 1 year going in the direction of the professional development. And all of this was possible because, as I mentioned, first of all, the environment, but as a member of SAR or as all of the immigrants here in the audience that you are being transferred to completely new environment, we need to identify, and we also need the guidance to identify those opportunities, those open resources or chances to gain more in our professional development. So, and then I also realized like there are more opportunities. I start understanding the system in Sweden, how it works. For instance, like now I understand in whole Europe, you have like these 8-year rules or 7 years rules. So then you also need to have like, let's say, plan B or further planning for integration in your future, in your career. And besides that, I realized really early in my integration, not only in Sweden as an academic base, but also as a social base, I realized the importance of the language. So although, for example, at Karolinska Institute, English is the main constructive language that we are using, interacting, meetings, everything done in English. But it's still outside the lab, outside this environment bubble that where I work, you face the Swedish community. So if you really want to integrate in this community, you need to learn the local language. Initially, in my case, was the Swedish language. And thanks also to the Encompass, so KI provide a lot of free courses, actually, or discounted courses to learn the language, and also on the level of the commune and the whole country, literally tells you in different ways, like, hey, learn the language, it's better for you, whether it's like it's your working language or no. If you are thinking in staying here for longer, maybe learning the language would not be a bad thing. So I started that, not only to have this cultural integration, social integration, but as a second plan also for my future career plans. As Leo was introducing me, I do have a bachelor degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. And then I realized I do need to learn the language in order to get a license, for example, in case if I was trying to learn more or to gain more opportunities for future. So in general, something that I can see that moving to Sweden under forced condition helped me to realize that my capabilities, my skills can transfer always with me, but I need always to align them to integrate into my new community via help and support of community. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Wasma. I I really appreciated, especially hearing about the role that studying Swedish language has played in kind of opening up new opportunities for you in Sweden. I think focusing on language can be a really hard thing to do when there are so many demands on scholars' time and energy and focusing on publications and teaching and just the challenges of integrating. But I think your story is really a testament to how helpful and important that language study can be. And the other thing that really struck out to me about your remarks was how often you use the word collaboration, which I think is a really good segue to our next speaker, Jonathan Niguez. So I will invite Jonathan to turn on his camera now. Dr. Niguez will be focusing his remarks on networking and the role that networking has played in his career. Dr. Niguez is a researcher and lecturer affiliated with the University of Cologne in Germany. His research examines social inequalities, focusing on labor exploitation, migrant exclusion, and epistemic inequality, as well as practices of collaborative knowledge production. And his work has a regional focus on the Gulf states, Northern Europe, and West Africa. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Leah, for the introduction, and hello to everyone. Well, I think just to get straight to the point and to make the best use of my time, I will maybe just start by clarifying, something. Unlike Wasama, my affiliation, mostly is with, I came to Germany under the Philipp Schwarz initiative of the Alexander Humboldt Foundation. Yeah, so it's a sister organization and they work very closely with the SAR. Yeah, and so what I can say is as soon as I got to Germany, but then when even already before I was invited to give this participate in this roundtable, I already kind of reflected a bit. I had moments when I reflected on the very topic of networking. And the reason I felt like reflecting on, how I have experienced networking was just because I felt that after staying in Germany for about 5 years, I felt like, my network, I had like a really good network, which was way much better than the network which I had before. And there are a number of reasons for that. And so, how did I get to a point where, I felt so comfortable about my network, in terms of my career development and the kind of impact which that is having on me? So, the first thing is not long after I arrived in Germany, when I started working at the university, I received an invitation actually from Serena, and based on earlier exchanges with her, so she asked me to contribute. She invited me to contribute to an edited volume, and she made it very clear to me. She said, "Hey, Jonathan, this has nothing to do with the SAR work which I am doing. This is just a project which I came across, and I thought that it could be, you fit in so well." And initially, I was not interested, and I made that very clear. But then I did something, just the fact that she invited me, I appreciated that a lot. So, but just to say no, I felt like at least I should suggest someone. So I suggested another colleague, like there is this other person who I also think can fit well. Then there was that exchange going on, but eventually they got back to me. She got back to me, the editors of the volume, they convinced me, and I agreed to contribute a chapter to the volume. And the volume basically was about the experience of non-Western scholars or scholars from the global South, their experience in doing research and teaching in the global North. So that's how I fitted into the project. But most importantly, we worked with a specific theoretical framework, which is a Homi Bhabha's notion of the third space. And this is a framework which it was the first time that I was working with this framework. I remember as a PhD student, I read Homi Bhabha. His work was too abstract for me, so I did not bother to revisit his work again. So, but in the process of working on this particular project, I learned so much, that at the end, after the volume was published, I continued to work on this with this framework of the third space, in terms of research collaboration. And slowly, I developed kind of a profile. I realized only later on that I had developed a profile based on the invitations which I was getting. I was invited to give, participate in roundtables, on panels, even to give like guest lectures. Yeah. And I also adopted that framework in my own research. So this particular example, the reason I start with this example is just to show like how networking, can start from nothing. It's not something which you can go out there and then you feel like, okay, I want to do this. Sometimes it just starts out of nowhere. And when you engage with people, you have no idea where that would lead to and whether there is even anything in that engagement that would benefit you. So, and the reason I'm making this point is just to emphasize that networking for me, as I've come to understand and see it, it's the same approach, as how you deal with people in your everyday life. And that approach basically is if you are professional, if you treat people with respect, if you are nice to people, that kind of energy, they would treat you back more or less in the same way. Of course, it doesn't mean that you can basically work so well with everyone all the time. But the point at least is even when people reach out to you, if you are unable to do something, at least get back to them, take your time and let them know why you cannot participate in something or why at that particular point in time, you have a full plate. Then the same approach, works like in terms of my networking on campus, in the department, the faculty, but also my host officers at the international office of the University of Cologne. So when I first came to Cologne, not long, I remember there was a time when I was contacted by the international office and they were just like, hey, Jonathan, we would like to support you in terms of a workshop. If you plan to do maybe a workshop or invite people, just let us know. And there was a conference coming up. Then I was like, oh, this is the idea. I would like to organize a panel in this particular conference. And we're like, yeah, this is exactly something like this. We can support you. So, but then fast forward, I did organize the panel with other colleagues. And based on this this initiative, the panel itself eventually resulted in a special issue. And the people, the other colleagues from different universities around Europe who were like co-editors and who participated in the special issue, the relationship continue, after this project. Yeah. And I can also say the same thing when it comes to, say, just colleagues, at the University of Cologne. There are different kinds of relationships which I develop over time. Of course, there are those with whom I have really established some kind of a very professional relationship. But then there are also those that, it's more like it's professional, private. It's almost, the line is almost blurry. And it is blurry in the sense that our involvement, started just like on social event. We meet on campus during lunch, maybe during lunchtime, we go for lunch together. Sometimes in the weekend, we hang out together. And this came about first, I was being invited. I was invited to so many events, but then initially I was always so busy and my focus was just on my work. But then at some point, I realized that, when people reach out to you, be careful not to shut them out. So you should also open up to them. And then at some point, eventually, there is that personal and professional relationship going on. And the most important thing with this one is that those kind of relations, those are the people with whom sometimes at the university even, you might be struggling to do something, and you need like someone to help you through. For example, these are people who have a better understanding of the university system, how things are done. And then you turn to them, whether it's in the middle of the night, they are there to assist you. Yeah. And then to conclude, the final point, I will just say something regarding language. Yeah, because I have one experience related to language and which is very direct. When I first came to Germany, I was so focused on my work that I did not have time for language. And even though there was a free language course, I took that as a secondary issue. It was not my priority. So, but the lesson which I have learned now is like, for those who are coming, perhaps you should take the first month or 2 months and prioritize language because it really matters when your language skills are much better. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Professional networking is something that in my own career, sometimes makes me pretty uncomfortable. So I really appreciated you illustrating how networking can work with those examples and showing how sometimes networking is really as simple as just saying yes, to invitations or opportunities that maybe you're initially a little bit unsure about. So thank you for sharing that. Last but not least, we will hear from Nancy Pastero. Dr. Pastero is a sociocultural anthropologist and emerita professor at the University of California, San Diego in the US, whose academic work focuses on Indigenous politics in Latin America. She co-founded the Human Rights Program at UC San Diego and coordinates the Scholars at Risk program there. And she also serves on the University of California SAR Coordinating Committee. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Serena, and it was wonderful to hear from Wasma and Jonathan. Thank you. I am here to discuss how to best support scholars when they are on campus from the perspective of the host community. I will just say off the bat that I'm not going to talk about a very important issue, and that is the funding issue, which is actually the first step in becoming a host, is figuring out how to pay for it. That's an important and somewhat complex topic that I hope Serena and Leah will maybe host another webinar on. I'll just say that it can range from getting donor funding, from getting money from the local administration of your university, crowdfunding, Scholars at Risk and Scholars Rescue Fund, or some kind of combination of all of those things. It's an interesting thing, and I'd be very happy to talk to anybody who wants to get in touch with me afterwards about what we've done at the University of California. To start with, I want to just say what I think is one of the guiding principles of being a host institution. And that is, as you've seen from the discussions by both Wasm and Jonathan, these are colleagues who come to us with their own academic lives and trajectories, with agency and experience with not only their own academic projects, but also with the kinds of dangers that we are increasingly seeing in the United States and in our host places. So while the project of being a host is in some sense a humanitarian one, that is giving refuge to people in need, I think it's really important to start off the process of hosting really aware and not ignoring the power relations that come with any kind of humanitarian project. So I think that has kind of three implications. First is to think of our relationships with the scholars who come to our universities, thinking of them as colleagues with enormous amounts to contribute, as both Wasma and Jonathan have pointed out. It's extremely important, particularly as we all are descending into different kinds of risk and danger in our host countries. It's really important to think of these scholars as collaborators and as allies. And to do what Alfred Babo and Anita Fabos call share the platform. That is to invite them to share their knowledge and their experiences in our home institutions. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is to listen carefully to their individual needs before deciding what helping them means. That is, find out what their concerns and desires are. What are they wanting to stay for several years? Is this a temporary stop in their academic trajectory? Finding out what is really important for them instead of assuming that you as the host think might be helpful. And I guess the third is to make sure that any decisions that are made are made with the scholar. These are not students. These are colleagues. And so it's important to start off our relationships with respect and admiration and seeing how we can help. So then, with that as a guiding principle, I think the host's job is to really do everything possible to help the scholar negotiate, navigate the risks and that they face, and provide as many professional opportunities as possible. Every scholar has a different trajectory. Some people want to be here for a year until things clear up at home. Some people realize they'll probably never go home and they need a lot of help adjusting and in their own trajectory to live forever in the host country. This is all very complicated. It's very stressful. And I want to just remind hosts that it's a very difficult time when people first arrive at our host institutions. They're really in a difficult balancing situation. They've got, in my experience with the scholars we've hosted, they've felt like they had one foot at home. They're still looking at what's going on in their home country. Their families are often there. There's an enormous amount of guilt in some cases about how did I get to leave the country when my family's still there. Fear about the future, a lot of uncertainty. And yet in that moment that's so difficult, the host's job is to help them think through moving forward to the next stage. So it's a complicated and difficult moment for everybody, but so important, as both Jonathan and Wasma have pointed out. So I want to say a few of the main points that I think hosts should keep in mind as they are considering this. And this, again, is aside from the funding question. The first one I would mention is how important it is to have a good match between a mentor and the institution and the scholar. That is, not every institution is the right place for a scholar coming to seek that year or 2 years of refuge. we've had people that have come that we were just so anxious to help somebody, and they came into the university and we just didn't have the right mentor for them, and that made their stay much more difficult. Those cases where we had a very good mentor mentee match, that made all the networking that Jonathan was talking about so much easier. A good mentor can really help figure out what the scholar needs, and help them find those networking opportunities, and address whatever kind of gaps they might need. So one suggestion is right at the beginning when the scholar arrives is to do an analysis with the scholar of what assets they have and what gaps in their professional training. Like Wasma was saying, she found that when she got there, what her training had a hole in it and she needed to fill that gap. That's something a good mentor can help figure out really quickly, and try to help the person meet those. And I would say that most campuses have some sort of staff on board that can help with that kind of analysis too. We have, at least at all the UCs, we have postdoctoral program and staff folks that give all kinds of training and can really help somebody identify those needs. So that's the first one, a good match with the institution and the mentor. The second one is that as somebody who's been involved in hosting, what I've found is that it's extremely important for hosts to have a whole committee of people uh, organized around helping and hosting. Because if you just have one person, that one person is going to have to do a lot of different things and may well get burnt out. They may not have the skills and the capacity to do everything. So an academic mentor can do one thing, but it's really important to have other people who can help with the other important aspects of a scholar's life. As Serena says, scholars can't succeed academically and professionally unless their other needs are met. So it's important to have a group of people who can help figure out what kind of housing are you going to be able to provide? What furniture? What, help figure out all that kind of stuff. What do the scholars' children need to be enrolled in particular schools? What kind of health care is necessary? What kind of legal help do people need? At least in the United States, we've had an enormous push to try to provide legal help because of the difficult immigration situation and the kind of hostile attitude towards immigrants. And so that's really important. And the person to help you figure out, what lab to work in may not know anything about the legal situation. So it's really important to have a group to help with that. And I would say that a crucial thing is to recognize that one of the main needs that scholars have is to meet the question of alienation and loneliness, and to try to help people get engaged in the local community. The networking that Jonathan talked about is really important. A final thing that I'll point out is that teaching is something that host institutions can offer. When we first started doing hosting, we had people teaching, but the language question became really critical that everyone has talked about. And if people's language skills aren't great, it's not a great thing to just drop them into teaching in a new community, a new culture, a new institution with students who may not understand them well. On the other hand, teaching can be a wonderful way for people to feel engaged and involved in the institution. One of our Ukrainian scholars, who we didn't have planned to teach, was actually really upset because he felt he had so much to give and really wanted to teach our students. So I think that's another one of the things that the mentor and the scholar can decide at the beginning. Are you ready to teach? Do you want to teach? Do you want to just focus on your research, or would you feel more involved in the local community? Finally, last thing, I know I'm running out of time. The last thing I would point out is that healthcare is a critical critical part of the package that hosts have to involve. And it needs to start from the first day. One of our scholars got bitten by a spider as he was moving into his new apartment, and our healthcare hadn't kicked in, and it ended up being extraordinarily expensive. We find that often people who are coming from war zones or who've been in transition for a long time have postponed a lot of their healthcare needs. And by the time they arrive, they have really severe and urgent healthcare issues, both mental and physical needs. So please make sure that healthcare is available and paid for when you arrive. So I just want to say that hosting is a complicated process. It takes a community, it takes a village, but it's a wonderful opportunity to work with amazing scholars. Like I wish I could have been collaborators with both Jonathan and Wasma here. And it forms long-term personal and professional relationships that I really value. Our first scholar that we had about 8 years ago is just getting ready to come back to UCSD to give a talk about her book that she has just written. And it's just such a wonderful sort of circle to see what happens after this kind of support. So I hope hosts can take these suggestions, and if you have any questions, please be in touch with me. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Nancy. I particularly appreciated your point about the importance of that strong academic fit between the mentor and the scholar who they're hosting. I think, sometimes hosts are so eager to help that they don't think as much about the importance of that academic fit. But, as you said, these are professional positions, and for this to be professionally meaningful, our experience shows us again and again that academic fit really matters. So now we're in the Q&A portion of the webinar. So I'll invite all of our speakers to turn their cameras back on. And our speakers have generously agreed to stay about 5 minutes later to allow time for a couple more questions. So this first question I'll pose to the whole group. I think anyone could answer this. What strategies can a scholar use to connect with mentors in their field? And in particular, do you have any advice for finding mentors when you're not currently in a placement?
I can go.
Go ahead, Jonathan. Thank you.
Okay. Since I talked about networking, I think one of the most crucial things about networking, which I have come to appreciate, is that if you wait, most often people realize the importance of X or Y at the time when they need something from that person. And don't be surprised that people would not give anything to you or respond to you. So the best networking is like at the very when there is nothing, when you are not needing something so big. If you feel like I am working on this particular issue, maybe there is this person over there, or I don't know, there is something which might be interesting. Reach out. Oh, and like I said earlier, when people contact you, even when they ask you the most things which doesn't even make sense to you, take your time and respond to them. Yeah, because the time when you need something, you might not even know how to get to the person who might have the answers, but then you might have access to another person who does. Yeah, and that makes a difference. If, for example, Serena should introduce me to someone she has a very strong connection to that person, it makes a difference than me reaching out to that person directly.
I'll say also that I completely appreciate that, Jonathan. Asking somebody for help at the moment you need it is really risky because they're going to be busy, right? Even if they want to help or whatever. The most productive networking relationships are things that emerge organically from what you have in common. So if you're working on a particular topic and you read somebody's article that you really like, write them an email and say, I'm working on the same thing. Here's an article that I've written. I would love to talk to you, even on Zoom. Maybe we can find a way to, have a conference together. I love the fact that you had a panel, and look what happened with that panel. It led to so many things. It's got to be that you reaching out with a contribution that you can make, as opposed to expecting somebody to drop everything and when you need it. And you have so much to contribute that's the basis for that networking, is that reciprocal kind of interest. I remember doing that as a graduate student, and you feel like, why would anybody want to talk to me? But in fact, everyone loves to have somebody say, oh, I read your article. It was so great. It made me think of this, this, and this. Can I talk to you? People are going to respond, even if you're not in a formal relationship of mentorship with them. I have all kinds of people, that have reached out to me that weren't at my institution, and I've ended up being mentors to them because our interests are so connected. So I think that's the thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan and Nancy. I think it's an obvious point, but sometimes easy to forget that, really the foundation for good networking is just, authentic connection, authentic human and professional connection. So appreciate those reminders. This next question, I think I'll pose to Serena first, and then I'll welcome thoughts from the rest of the group if you have any. So if you've read the report, you'll see that the majority of SAR placements occur in Europe. And so one of our participants has asked, why is this the case? And what can universities in other countries learn or take away from hosts in Europe?
That's a great question. I did a little bit of research in the back end just to confirm this, but the first one is that there are more higher education institutions in Europe than in the US. So just we can start there, but there's also been just incredible advocacy and efforts in Europe to create opportunities specifically for at-risk scholars at European higher education institutions. So as I mentioned in my presentation, there's a number of countries that have national funding, one being the Alexander von Humboldt Philip Schwartz Initiative, which Jonathan participated in, but has created so many placements for at-risk scholars in Germany since 2016, I believe, maybe 2015. There's also national funding programs in France, Switzerland, Sweden, and I apologize if I'm forgetting others, but we just know that funding opens up opportunities, both to create placements, but also to create structures for advocating to and with the government, for collaborating with other actors that are outside of the university. And I say that with the major caveat that there are also other sections in different countries that have attempted to create national funding programs, and that has been very challenging. So it's not just do this and it will work, but I think that has been one component that has really helped. We also have a SAR Europe office that has done a lot of advocacy and created programs within Europe to create pathways for at-risk scholars with major funding organizations like MSCA and other things like that. So I would say that's a major contributing factor.
Thank you, Serena. I'm just taking a look at our list of questions here, being mindful of time. I think the last question maybe that we can end on is a question about psychosocial supports, and I'll pose this to anybody who wants to answer. But I think Nancy, in your presentation, you talked about, right, scholars when they come to your campus, they're bringing their professional selves, of course, but also their whole selves, right? And Wasma and Jonathan, you both talked a bit about, social connection and a bit about the role that has played, in your integration in your new environment. So I'd love to hear from anyone in the room about psychosocial supports that you have found helpful, or from the kind of host perspective, psychosocial supports that you have been able to offer.
I'd love to hear from Jonathan and Wasma about what was most helpful for you all as you were transitioning in that difficult time.
So I may start on this. So actually, it was this like to get the mental health, let's say, was more important for me than getting the employment. Because at a certain point, you may have the expertise, you may have the skills, but mentally you are in a different state. So first of all, you need to stabilize that and then like seek a work or seek other priorities. And as you mentioned, health, whatever it's like physical or mental is very important. Otherwise we cannot function well. So one of the things that I've been offered, for example, either from SAR itself or from my host institute was social, like socioeconomical, even like help in general. So help with everything from getting settled physically and also mentally. So it was really interesting and beneficial kind of help that I received. I believe it's amazing and it's supposed to be always the foundation prior to hosting.
Well, in my own case, what I can add to that is that not long, I think less than 6 months after my arrival in Germany, I think the COVID-19 pandemic kicked in. So the whole psychosocial mental health issue was almost like intense, for a combination of all these things coming together. But what made a difference for me, and which I noted in my discussion was just having connections to real people, colleagues around with whom, we could talk about work, but then we could also talk about personal issues. I think that makes a really it really helped me go through all these difficulties. And I would say for all of us, yeah, because then we had our own, small network that we would hang out maybe after work, in the weekends, online during the pandemic, and we talk about all sorts of things. Most important is we would talk about all kinds of things. Yeah. And I think that helped. It worked for me.
One of the things that we've found is it's really important to figure out what the diasporic community is like in our community. If we're bringing people in, we want to say, can we help you find a church or a mosque or a center so you can meet people like you? Are there grocery stores that have food that will make you feel at home? Are there, that sort of kind of social relations? But the other thing that we've done at the UC, at the University of California, is try to get together peer situations. You were talking about that, Serena, and I think it's so important for people to be able to talk to other scholars who either from their country or not, who have gone through the whole process. Because it's really different to hear from me as a settled scholar from here than a scholar who's gone through these transitions. So I think having for the host to be able to offer relationships with peers for the scholars coming in is an extremely important thing.
I agree, and I'll just add very quickly because I know we're taking everyone's extra time, but I feel like I glossed over the importance of your connection in my presentation, and I think it's something that we have seen when we hosted scholar trainings where we were bringing scholars together for the first time. Just the natural development that came out of those meetings was really beautiful. I mean, sometimes the scholars created a WhatsApp group together and then have been in touch. Sometimes scholars invited each other to their classes to give guest lectures. I think probably more than anything, there is just a sense that you're not alone, that while you may have experienced something that is unique to you only, that there are other people who can understand it in a way that is different than us at SAR and at the universities. And I think that is so important. And it's why we're thinking about alumni mentorship and finding ways to bring scholars together in safe and secure ways, and to just recognize that there are limits to what we can provide that can be so much more meaningful from a peer. So I think I feel like that's a really kind of nice place to end.
Absolutely.
I agree. I want to thank all of our participants for being here today and all of our speakers for sharing your insights and experiences. I think a common thread that I heard throughout all of your remarks were connection and collaboration. So those are sort of the things that I'm taking away from today and that I'll be thinking about moving forward. Um, as I said earlier, we will be sharing the recording, so look out for that in your inbox and on our website. We'd love to hear your questions and remarks on the webinar and on the full report. So please do get in touch with us. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks all.
Thank you.